An introduction to towboating and the towing industry so that you will know what to expect when you meet a towboat. I have years of experience and served on the East Tennessee Freight Advisory Committee and was a member of the Society of Naval Architects and Marine Engineers. I have numerous books on towboating and have studied this industry very carefully from my time on the Mississippi to my time on the Tennessee River. Boats are not tugboats. Tugboats primarily do ship assist work and offshore towing, while towboats operate inland. Towboats under 26 feet are uninspected by the Coast Guard and don't require a licensed pilot, but many of them are used in bridge construction and similar work. You see a fairly large towboat that is 8,800 horsepower, but they can range all the way up to 10,500 horsepower triple screw. Here's a large triple screw towboat belonging to Arthur Daniels Midland, and you can see the swing buoy that they use to try to gauge when they're sliding sideways. Jack-up towboats, affectionately referred to as the ugliest boats on the river, are needed to go under shallow bridges on the outside of normal channels. Here you see just some of the many parts of a towboat, and they do vary from boat to boat. I was in the process of building a 25.5-foot towboat to try to promote towboating to bring containers on barge all the way to Knoxville, Tennessee from Mobile, Alabama. Here you see typical propulsion on a 10,500 horsepower towboat with both steering rudders behind the props and flanking rudders ahead of the props used when backing. Towboats evolved from steamboats that pushed barges in shallow water so they could carry more load. This is an early stern-wheel towboat that is now a recreational vessel. Here is an image of the largest stern-wheel towboat, the Sprague. The only thing that remains today is the wheel that came off of the boat. Here you see a steam towboat pilot with the two tiller sticks that control the forward rudders and the rear flanking rudders. Shipping by barge is 1/15 the cost of shipping by highway and half as much as shipping by rail. The largest tow ever recorded was Miss KD with a 73 barge tow, and I met that towboat several times when she was on the Mississippi. Just one barge can eliminate 58 large semi-trucks from our overly crowded highways. Here's another comparison of shipping costs by different modes. Shipping by barge is the greener way to go because it releases far less pollution. Shipping by barge is also much safer than shipping by other modes. Towboats have a lead captain and a pilot, and here you can see some of the very extensive training that's required to qualify for either position. There's almost two of every crew position on a towboat except the cook, but towboats operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and the schedule is 6 on, 6 off, and then 6 on again for either 28 or 30 days. After 28 straight days aboard, especially young crew members may be eager to find the crew van and be able to go home. Line haul towboats can't afford to stop. They typically burn around 10,000 gallons of fuel per day, and they use midstream refueling and also resupply so that they can keep continuously moving. At one time, towboats were called UTVs, uninspected towed vessels, but in July of 2016, the Coast Guard issued Subchapter M that required towboats to be inspected if they were over 26 feet in length. I inspected several of the local towboats to try to help them comply. Nashville Bridge Company patented a spoonbill bow for barges, but it was not widely adopted, and most barges have the configuration that you see here. Here you see a barge being constructed at Sardino shipyards in Tennessee. New hull designs are often tested at the David Taylor Model Basin, which my wife and I have visited to find out how things operate there. A standard hopper barge is either 195 or 200 feet long by 35 feet wide by 12 feet, and on the lower Mississippi, sometimes they can go up to 14 feet. Here you see an example of containers on barge that I was trying to get set up so that we could ship containers from Mobile to Knoxville, Tennessee. And you also see the percentages of corn, soybeans, and wheat that are transported by barge. This is a container on barge loading crane in Norfolk, Virginia, where I visited to find out more about containers on barge. Some very old barges may leak, and sometimes cedar shakes are driven into cracks, but you still have to use a trash pump to dewater the barge. The most frequent towboat to visit Knoxville is Bearcat, and sometimes she can bring as many as 9 barges up from Chattanooga. And we also get asphalt tows occasionally. This is a Marathon Petroleum Company asphalt towboat operating in the Knoxville area. Asphalt barges are considered dangerous red flag loads because of the molten asphalt. Large towboats can push up to 50 barges, each containing 1,500 tons of cargo, against a 6 to 9 mile an hour current on the lower Mississippi. When I took the Tunica Queen up to dry dock in Memphis, it took me over 6 hours to get to dry dock, but less than 2 to get back with the current helping me. Here you see a typical barge coupling with fiberglass covers for grain or salt and steel cables holding the barges together. This is a deckhand using a steamboat ratchet with a toothpick to tighten the steel cables that hold barges together. They have to be rechecked from time to time during a trip. The rear of a string of barges is also connected to the towboat by face wires. These are sometimes steel, but many companies are now going to synthetic fibers, which are lighter and easier to use. Here's the example of a Tier 3 lower emission towboat that uses after exhaust scrubbers to lower the emissions. River barges on the Tennessee have to pass through locks. Some of the locks are as large as 110 by 600, but the Fort Loudon lock is only 60 by 360, which permits only one barge to transit at a time. Here you see a typical pilot house of a towboat. This one belongs to Charlie Malcone that tied up beside the Star Riverboat to take on water. Almost all large towboats use the Rose Point Inland Chart Plotter software. As you can see here, it enables you to build your tow layout, and that layout is displayed on the chart to help you navigate narrow bridges. This is Bearcat pushing a 3x2 configuration in the Knoxville, Tennessee area. You need to be very careful when meeting tows at night, as the barges may not be square on the head, and the red and green lights may be on totally different barges, but the special flashing yellow light will always be on the lead barge. This is just two of the most prominent towboat organizations in the United States, and I was fortunate to be a speaker at one of the Inland Waterways conferences. Tows, like boats, pivot about a third of the way back from the head. So a towboat navigating a turn is actually sliding sideways, and he may be pointing straight at you, but he's sliding away all the time. Here you see a radar image of me passing Bearcat with a number of barges just after he comes through the bridge ahead of us. With AIS input to OpenCPN software, you get a head flash that you can set to tell you where your boat will be. This one indicates 5 minutes. That will also show for boats that you're meeting, so you can gauge exactly when and where you will meet. Don't ever cross ahead of a tow without asking. Here you see a 40 barge tow, and you can imagine the blind spot in the head of the tow. And even with small tows, there is an extensive blind spot, especially with empty barges up front. Here you can see the crew change John boat on the back of Bearcat while she's headed upriver. Here are just a few of some of the towboats I have met either on the Mississippi or the Tennessee River. This is the largest towboat by size that belongs to the Corps of Engineers, and it's actually used as a quarters boat as well as a towboat. Here you can see my chart that was developed to compare towboat required horsepowers to the towboat length. This map shows the major barging areas in the United States, including the Tennessee River. This slide shows the container volumes by port, and Mobile has a lower volume, but it would still be worthwhile to bring containers from Mobile to Knoxville. Here's a drawing of ports and terminals that are created by using their latitude and longitude. Here are the Mariad Gateway regions, and we're in the Eastern Gulf Lower Mississippi Gateway. Mariad proposes marine highway routes that are eligible for local development. I had proposed an M4075 route from the Tin Tom to Knoxville, but it was never adopted. Containers could be loaded in Mobile, brought to Chattanooga by Parker Towing Company, then brought by Bearcat to Knoxville and offloaded at the Burkhart Intermodal Transfer Terminal. Here are just some of the people I worked with on my container on barge traffic trying to bring containers to Knoxville. Here's an AutoCAD drawing of the towboat that I had planned to build. I ran Delft stability modeling software on the barge configuration. Here you see my towboat and barge models that were created for illustration. This is me and a friend doing stability measurements on the barge that I actually built. And here are the riding moment calculations for that barge. In this image, you see the frames that I had constructed for the towboat before I lost a place to build it and the project was canceled. I made a presentation at the Tin Tom Waterways Conference about my idea of bringing containers to Knoxville. This is my scale model barge and scaled containers sitting on the trailer. Thanks for viewing, and be very careful about barges and tows, especially red flag loads. And here you see an example of some of the security training that is required for both towboats and commercial vessels. For more information about navigation training, see americasboatingclub.org and look for an index of courses and seminars that are available there.